Okay, you can take this any direction you'd like. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with the blowback. I'm going to go all in. I suggest you do as well. Specifically, what this is about is LSU women's basketball coach Kim Mulkey being treated, follow me here, being treated by the media differently than a male coach. You want me to put a question mark after that? I'll put a question mark after that. Now, you can add to that. You can take this any way you want. I don't have a problem with this being brought up. I think it's kind of a worthy conversation. I'm happy to do it. I'm happy that to go all in. I think you're going to disagree with me, but that's okay. The head coach of LSU, that's Kim Mulkey, is she treated differently by my industry, by the media industry, than a male coach, a successful male coach? Now, understand, and we can project this out if you would like, because here you are now on the eve of the day of the women's Final Four, which is bigger than it's ever been. So these are all worthy conversations, but so is the controversy. Absolutely. Are female athletes, female basketball players treated differently by my industry, by the media industry? Do you view them differently? Do you think there's hypocrisy here? Then it would be male stars, male Final Four players, Final Four coaches, that kind of thing. Is the standard differently? Now, Kim Mulkey has been ranting for at least 2 weeks straight, every chance she gets, of how she's treated by the media. And for better or worse, agree or disagree, again, you can take this any way you want. I'm fine with the pushback, and I'm fine with people saying, yeah, right on, she is being treated differently. But she's been ranting about her treatment easily for 2 weeks. And she says over and over and over again that she doesn't pay attention to it. But then she spends almost every single news conference with a microphone in front of her face complaining about how she is portrayed. Now, I think we need to acknowledge this. Her ranting, her complaining, her whining, as I would call it, it doesn't throw her team off. They're in the Final Four again. So you can't say that she's doing her team necessarily a disservice. I think the bigger picture here is, as women's basketball has grown, and as she, to her credit, I guess, if you want to say it, she's a lightning rod, but she is getting attention. She's moving the needle for the women's sport. The question is she right or are other people right? They're being treated differently. Her criticism, specifically, is it more pointed? Is it more personal than if she were a male coach? And I want you to think it through. Now, I would add to the question, overall, are women's sports, are women's athletes treated differently by the media industry? Is the coverage unfair? Is it more sexist? Is it completely sexist? Ask yourself. Just be ready to bring some examples, by the way. I think you should. How do you react to this statement in a column in today's USA Today today? Okay? LSU women's basketball coach Kim Mulkey subjected to harsh lens that male coach is. How about this? USA Today today. You might not like Mulkey. You might not like her players. But if you are not bothered by the public discourse that surrounds them and cannot see the sexism and the racism at its root, the problem isn't them, it's you. Okay? Is it? Is that a fair attack on all of us, the industry? Is that a fair assessment? You might not like her players, but if you are not, or you might not like her, but if you're not bothered by the public discourse that surrounds them and cannot see the sexism and racism at its root, the problem isn't them, it's you. Women are held to different standards, and that goes double for women who are successful, quadruple for women who are successful in businesses traditionally dominated by men. She said, Kim Mulkey is, again, if you think that this is true, if you think this is a fair assessment of how women are covered, how women are talked about, how the whole thing is portrayed in the media industry, which I think is always fair to criticize, absolutely. you need to appreciate her statement because she is drawing attention to it. And if you want to say that it's a worthy cause, then you got to give her props. She said, I think this may have been yesterday. She says, I'm in the last third of my career, but I'm not going to let sexism continue. And if you don't think it's sexism, then you're in denial. Now, she's specifically talking about herself, which I have a problem with, but she's talking about herself. The articles about her, the coverage about her is completely sexist. And what I think is interesting about right now, whether it's the USA Today or Kim Mulkey herself, I think a lot of media people are just following her lead. And it's probably not too politically correct that I'm doing this on a network that has devoted a lot of time and money to women's basketball, but I think these are real issues. It's a real debate. It's a legitimate debate. And if you want to give her credit, he was being kind of a pioneer, and you want to say that she's kind of a crusader for this, there's no doubt that she has taken on, and she is meeting it head on and calling everybody she can out, that the way she's treated, and I think to maybe a lesser degree, the way her players are treated is sexist. There, react to that. That's on you. Go ahead. Go ahead. Form your opinions of this. It's a legitimate question. She turned right around and pointed it back at everybody, how women in sports are treated now, particularly now that they have TV contracts, that people are making a lot of money like her, that they're superstars in the game. Is it sexist? The article today, the column today is, hey, look, it's the LA Times, of which Kim Mulkey is also called out. She has spent a lot of time criticizing the Washington Post. The Washington Post, a male writer, did a story about her. It's not that favorable. I don't think it's the worst thing I've read. I don't see the problem, but she does. And a lot of people are saying, see, you never write this about a male coach. You wouldn't dig in the private life of a male coach, which I think it's BS. But the LA Times described her team as dirty debutantes. I had never heard that before, but she's pissed about that too. It described her teams as dirty debutantes. The term refers to exactly what you think it does, and not a dog whistle of misogyny and racism, but a blaring bullhorn. How dare people attack us like that? Mulkey asked. You don't have to like the way we play. You don't have to like the way we trash talk. You don't have to like any of it. We're good with that. But I can't sit up here as a mother and grandmother and a leader of young people and allow somebody to say that. The column goes on to say, remember when Taylor Swift was ruining the NFL? Oh, please. You really going to do that? I'm trying not to rip this. I'm trying to give everybody a fair chance here to weigh in. There are plenty of male coaches with documented records of doing terrible things or being unlikable people who have not been put under the microscope like Kim Mulkey has. I'll fight with all of you about this. That's not true. That's not true at all. You're really trying to say that successful male coaches who've done ridiculous things off the floor aren't scrutinized? Are you kidding me? How can you say that? One of the first people mentioned in this column is former Texas coach Chris Beard. It says Chris Beard was fired at Texas after being arrested for domestic violence. Where was the deep dive into his relationships, professional and personal? ? Okay, fair. Do you really think that Chris Beard is somehow treated softer than Kim Mulkey? Publicly, your reaction. Everyone's reaction, myself included. Is the media lens treating men, male sports stars, different than the media lens of female sports stars in a sexist and misogynistic way? I'm going to say no, but you can say yes. All right, here I go. I'm going in. You ready? Have you started to form your opinions? Have you got some ideas here? Look, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. That's cool. This really is a matter of opinions, how you see the media lens covering different stars. Is LeBron James covered and talked about in a different way than Caitlin Clark? Is Kim Mulkey talked about and treated differently than any number? Rick Pitino, Chris Beard, we can go down the list. I mean, you're forming some opinions about how the coverage is set up? I am. I have. I'm going in. Ready? I'm going in. Give me a break. Give me a break. You cannot say, I don't think you can say, I don't think you can objectively say there's not a deep dive into sports stars, not a deep dive into coaches. Are you kidding me? How blind would somebody have to be? I'm talking about male coaches. The media industry does. The media industry does this because the public and fans want it. The example used by the USA Today is how Kim Mulkey is treated in a sexist, misogynistic way, and Chris Beard is not. Chris Beard got fired, whacked, publicly whacked, completely ridiculed. I would say for pretty good reason. To suggest that somehow, myself included, took a soft approach to Chris Beard and a tougher approach on Kim Mulkey that's absurd. He got another job. He wins. So does she, by the way. I think that is a ridiculous example. He got fired. No questions asked. He was ripped to shreds for good reason. His life was picked apart. Absolutely was picked apart. Now, I understand that she is threatening, I'm going to be clear about this. She is threatening to sue the Washington Post and has done so publicly countless times. Defamation, 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 that kind of thing. I mean, she may go after the LA Times too, or anybody for that matter. I think it's lame. I think it's weak. Look, this would be my takeaway. And again, you can see it completely differently. But you can't have stardom in sports and stardom in pop culture. You can't have it both ways. You can't. And nor should you, by the way. You can't crave being a star. All right, let's think about that for a second. You can't crave being a star. And Kim Mulkey craves being a star. You know how I can make that argument? On top of the fact that her news conferences are about her defamation claims are about her, the last 2.5 weeks of her team's Final Four run, which means she's a very good coach and very good at what she does and gets paid well, but it's been about her. She wears sequins, and I don't know, maybe it's fake fur, I don't know what it is, just to get noticed. Is that not true? Well, that's a sexist thing to say, Jeff. What do you mean? She intentionally she's purposely trying to get attention. And that's fine if she does, but you can't have it both ways. You can't. You can't seek the limelight. You can't seek the stage. You can't wear the sequins. You can't scream and yell news conferences and say, "Oh, leave me alone when it's time to pick me apart." And say you don't treat guys like that. That is absolutely not true. You can't have it both ways. I don't think anybody should objectively want stars to be treated differently. She wants to stand out. She wants to be a rebel. She complains constantly. Her news conferences, like I said, are about her. And now the Washington Post and LA Times think she's such a big deal. Here's what I'm saying. You can't have it both ways. News organizations now recognize you're such a big deal. You're such a star. They're doing stories on you. You know, when you're not a big deal, what happens? Nothing. Nobody pays any attention. The fact that the Washington Post and the LA Times is even spending any time on you tells you you're a big star, so you got what you wanted. You sought the limelight, and you got it. And now you don't like it, and you're whining about it. And the accusation that guys are not treated that way is absurd. It really is. Women's basketball is now big enough and its stars are recognizable enough that there is a deep dive. There's a deep dive into the personalities. That's what the public wants. The public isn't into sport. The public is into drama and personalities, male or female. So the bigger star you are, the more of the public wants a part of you. The more the public wants a part of you, the more the media organizations want a part of you. They're following public demand. When Kim Mulkey becomes a star, they're going to write about you and talk about you. And that includes a deep dive into your personality, which is pretty sketchy at best. So she wins, and she's paid millions, honestly, in a sport that doesn't generate that much money. It doesn't. It's not that lucrative. But she's paid very well. And a male coach if a male coach were intentionally as outlandish as her, and there have been plenty that have done it. Like Bob Knight would come to mind. Oh, Jeff, you're a jerk for comparing her to Bob Knight. See, that's the point. We're not allowed to hold you to any kind of standard. Just because you're female, you automatically need to be treated differently. Bob Knight is a jackass and a jerk. And incredibly successful. Can we not say both things? Can you not say the same thing about a female coach? Is that untouchable? Is that not allowed? That's lame. That's weak. You're not a star. You're a hypocrite. So a male coach who did the same stuff as her, and plenty do, and there's plenty of us that rip them for it. I'll give you a perfect example in 10 seconds. But a male coach that would dress like her, scream like her, hold news conferences like her, and talk about herself all the time, they would be subject to a deep dive by ESPN, by the Washington Post, by the LA Times, news organizations, because the public cares. A coach who had a former star player that was a political prisoner. Let's don't just act as if these things aren't a big deal. A male coach who had a player, star player. She did at Baylor, Brittany Griner. She was in essentially a Russian prison, left to die. Okay, over a vape pen. She was in that Russian prison because she's famous, she's black, and she's lesbian. There. But a male coach who had a former superstar player that was a political prisoner, and if that coach essentially publicly dismissed that story, and I'm not saying she wanted her in that prison, I'm not saying that, but I do think it's fair to say that she was awfully standoffish about the whole thing. That male coach would be trashed. He could care or not care. You could care or not care, but they would be trashed. They'd be called out on it. You can't want to be recognized and treated just like male coaches and players. And when you're treated just like male coaches and players, you say things like, I'm a mother and a grandmother? Wait. Which one do you want? Do you want to be treated like you want to be treated like Bob Knight or Dabo Swinney or Nick Saban? How do you want it? Then you say, I'm a grandmother and a mother? Oh, so you're not a coach? Which one is this? That's what she said. I'm a mother and a grandmother. Well, that's convenient. So now you don't want to be treated like a male coach, male player, male star in your intention seeking yourself. I don't know which one it is. So I'm finding this to be a very common argument, this whole thing. And that's fine if we disagree on this. Many women in media who cover women's sports, this is my opinion, women in media who cover women's sports who preach about wanting and everything to be equal, the coverage to be equal, the pay scale to be equal, which is impossible because it's about demand and supply and everything else. They're not the same in demand. But the sport is growing. The sport's growing dramatically, mainly because of personalities. That's why it's growing. I think she knows that. But women who cover it want everything to be equal, but they don't like the equal star treatment when it comes from men. That's something I've noticed. That if there's a woman writing these stories, I think the reaction would be differently. Women in media can criticize and attack a male athlete or a coach personally, which is fine. But men in media can't go after female stars and coaches the same way. That's what I hear. You hear something differently? You hear her complaint differently? Because that's what I hear from her complaint. How dare you guys talk about us? That's misogynistic if you criticize me, but it would not be misogynistic if it would not be overly critical if I said it about Dabo Swinney, really, because he's a jerk just like you. So, Kim Mulkey, in my opinion, I'll give the perfect example of this. I was trying to think who is it modern day that I compare her to, just in my own personal take on them. Dabo Swinney is a male version of Kim Mulkey. Probably not quite as successful, but pretty successful as the head coach at Clemson. Okay? He's successful. He's over the top. He's whiny. He's a hickish jerk. There. Can I say that? Could I say it about her too? No, I bet not. He gets ripped all the time. And I think for good reason. I do it. I think he's whiny. I think he does a lot of that. I think she does the same stuff he does. Complains about the coverage, makes a bunch of money, talks about himself all the time, is extra preachy, and kind of a big crybaby. I think the same thing of her. He's a jerk as a coach, but a good one. She's a jerk as a coach, but a good one. You want it both ways? If he's fair game, why isn't she fair game in the same way? I bet a lot of people would agree about Dabo Swinney. I bet a lot of people would say they're sick and tired of hearing that guy whine and complain. So we can say all that stuff. And news organizations can pick him apart for good reason. But you can't with a women's basketball coach? You can't have it both ways.